Hello class, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to go over chapter 13, and basically it's a hodgepodge of investigation techniques, details, terminology of burglary, vehicle theft, arson, and other property related crimes. Different from chapter 12, but it has a lot more to do with different types of property crimes. So as we go through this, make sure you read the objectives and are able to discuss, identify, and explain some of the things that are in here by the time you're done with this or when you're done reading the chapter. A lot of good information on here. It's a kind of a long chapter, but it has a lot of interesting details that you need to know. So start out with a burglary. A burglary is defined as the unlawful entry of a building to commit a felony or theft. Use of force to gain entry is not necessary. So if you are walking by a house and the door is wide open and you go in the house unlawfully and you go in there to steal something or to commit a felony, that is burglary. So the house does not need, or the building does not need to be locked. And use of force, you don't need to pry the door or break a window in order for you or a person to become convicted of a burglary. Burglaries are very frequent, sometimes serious. The most common burglaries are residential burglaries. They sometimes happen in daylight hours when no one is home. The classic daytime burglary is somebody goes to the door of a house, knocks on the door to see if anybody's home, pretending to be a service person or a salesman. No one's home, then they go around the back and break in. Very common. That's why people have cameras, security, and dogs. Apparently my cat is not a good good burglar alarm. As far as non-residential burglaries of businesses, they usually occur at night when the building is closed. Depending on what research you look at and what cities, many burglaries are not solved, and sometimes the property is never recovered. Sometimes it is. Most property is recovered when it is etched or there's some kind of marking on it that someone engraves on something, especially tools, in order to get those back. Burglars usually steal cash or property that can be easily converted into cash, and they can fence the item or sell the item at a pawn shop. When you investigate a burglary, some of the considerations that need to go into this are that usually burglaries are discovered well after the crime has taken place and the perpetrator has fled. Sometimes when a homeowner comes home after work, they get home at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, burglary's been done during the day much earlier, and so a lot of the evidence may be gone, eyewitnesses may not be around, etc., etc. So these burglaries can be difficult to solve because a lot of the investigators don't know when it occurred, and there may not be witnesses or victims that can tell what happened. There's little physical evidence that can be found, and usually the stolen property is often discarded if it is not useful for the person. So these are unfortunate crimes that occur all the time in all cities. Burglar alarms and initial response. We talked about this in the last chapter. Basically, burglar alarms are great to help prevent burglaries, but are not useful at apprehending the criminals. So alarms are easily foiled or stopped by burglars. False alarms are frequent in residential use. Burglars do avoid homes with alarm systems. A lot of homeowners get signs and put it on their lawn in the front of their house that this house protected by Sentry Alarm or Liberty Alarm. Sometimes those are fake signs. They don't really have an alarm. A lot of people have cameras up now that also burglars will not like to burglarize places that have cameras either. But as the robbery that we went over in the last chapter, when responding to a burglary, they must first enter the building and clear the building because they don't know if the perpetrator is inside. Could be more than one. They must then search for and process the evidence if there is any, and then they can conduct the neighborhood eyewitness canvass talk to the neighbors. Do they have cameras? Did they see anything? Is there a neighborhood watch program, etc., etc.? So again, burglary is a very low-level investigation, but they're so common that sometimes they do get solved. The MO and target selection, similar to robbery, they can determine that through the chosen target. Where is the house? Is it on a corner? Is it a two-story house, single house? Is there an alarm? Is there a CCTV? What's the method of entry? Is the method of entry through the back window, back slider, the front door? And then how is the entry done? Is the door broken? Is the lock picked? Is there a key? Is there some sort of other tool that is used? And what type of property is taken or not taken? And why is some property left while other property is not left? A lot of burglars look for weapons, guns, rifles, ammo. Those can be easily sold or used in other crimes. Also, the amount of planning required to pull this off. Where is the house located? Is it in a cul-de-sac? Is it in a court? Is it on a main street? Is it a second-story apartment? How much planning was required to do this? And how the perpetrator searched for the property. Did they open drawers and throw things out? Was it haphazard? Did they know exactly where to go and just take the cash and the jewelry and then leave? Maybe it was an inside job. Maybe the person knew that that stuff was there. So all these are methods that the burglars use that can be used to catch them. Talked about the method of entry. It can be a professional burglar, a novice burglar, or a mid-range burglar, depending on the method of entry and the pre-offense planning that they did. Is it somebody that was just walking by, saw the door open and went in and just took some drugs from the cabinet? Or was it a professional burglar who studied the area, knew when the homeowner wasn't going to be gone, knew that they carried large sums of cash, and knew that they had a safe? So, value of the stolen property, due to the unidentification of the property, recovery is very low. So sometimes stealing property is common for people that are supporting a drug habit. What thieves do with the stolen property, they sell the property to a friend or relative, they trade it for drugs, they sell the property to a professional fencing operation, pawn shop, secondhand store, sell the property to strangers, keep the property for themselves. But usually it changes hands through monetary value. Now switching to motor vehicle theft. That's basically the term motor vehicle theft is when an individual steals or attempts to steal an automobile, truck, bus, motorcycle, snowmobile, or motor scooter. Most involve automobiles that are stolen by juveniles for the purpose of joyriding, taking the car around, hanging out, and then wrecking it or abandoning it. There is a very low clearance rate to solve these crimes because there's usually no witnesses or physical evidence. And when the vehicle is located with the perpetrator in it, that is very rare to happen. Usually the car is abandoned, pushed over a cliff, burned, or damaged. There are a lot of new tools now for vehicle theft. One of them is LPR technology, which we'll talk about in a second. But the way law enforcement officers can tell if a vehicle has been stolen when they pull somebody over is that the vehicle may be operated without ignition keys. That's a big sign. A broken steering column, broken windows to the vehicle, or the car has parts that are not consistent with the rest of the car, a missing trunk lock, the vehicle identification numbers on a vehicle do not match, and finally, license plates that are not registered to the vehicle they are on. All these are signs that a vehicle may be stolen. Sometimes it's all of these things, sometimes it's one of these things, sometimes it's none of these things. So sometimes it's difficult to tell. LPRs are cameras that are attached to police cars and scan license plates to identify stolen vehicles. So literally, these officers, and in Sacramento, Sac PD has these, and they will drive through the various malls, apartment complexes, or wherever they're at, turn on the LPR camera, and it records all the license plates as they drive by. They drive by, a couple, 3 miles an hour, And every once in a while they get a hit. Oh, this car's stolen, parked at Arden Fair Mall. Let's wait for the person to come out and talk to them about this potential stolen car. So LPRs are very good to have. They're not that expensive, and they really work well. Some other investigative strategies. There's physical evidence. Again, fingerprints are probably the most important thing, and DNA that can be on a car that has been stolen. Eyewitness accounts are rare, but can be beneficial to the investigation. And we've talked all about surveillance cameras. Most cars in parking lots, in businesses, business areas, malls, there's cameras all over the place. And surveillance video, if properly used, can be used to catch somebody. Bait cars, they're kind of funny. They, not funny, but on TV they have some shows where they have bait cars where they will park a nice car or not a nice car in an area where they think that cars will be stolen. And sure enough, 2 people come along, jump in the car, keys are in the car, and they're driving along. All of a sudden, the police are following them, and they turn the car off. And again, it's kind of interesting because the person doesn't understand what's going on when the car just dies, and all of a sudden the police are there. So again, bait cars are used to apprehend auto thieves that are prolific in doing this in certain areas. There's also task forces that are used to identify and apprehend auto thieves through multiple agencies: sheriff, DOJ, police, local law enforcement, etc. Arson. Arson is kind of a big deal. It refers to the willful burning or attempted to burn something. It can be a forest, can be a car, can be a house, can be anything. But it has to be deliberately set for the purpose of causing harm. That is the key. Clearance rates are low for this because it's very difficult to determine whether a crime was committed. Very few witnesses are available. Many agencies are involved, making the investigation more complicated. And obviously evidence is destroyed in the fire. So arson is a very horrible crime, can kill people, can damage property, etc., and it's very difficult to apprehend the suspects that commit these. Responding to the fire scene for an investigator. First, they must communicate with first responders to establish if the scene is safe to go into. Identify and interview individuals at the scene, the witnesses. Determine the security access to make sure it's safe. Identify and collect evidence at the scene, photograph everything, collect, package, and preserve evidence while maintaining the chain of custody of everything that they take. And a lot of times there's video taken of the scene and of the witnesses that are there, the crowd, because sometimes there's some arsonists who enjoy watching the fire, and sometimes they want to be involved in the crime scene, so they're there as a witness, sometimes to throw the police off. Evidence to determine the cause of fire. They can be classified as a natural cause, an accidental cause, a suspicious cause, an incendiary cause, or of unknown origin. And the book talks about those things. Very interesting about how fires are caused. The presence of an accelerant is indicative of arson. That's gasoline, kerosene, some sort of material that's going to burn. Though once that's used, it's necessary then to determine the point of origin. And again, depending on if it's flammable liquids, light bulbs exploding, that's where witnesses come in, or surveillance video comes in. There's also fire patterns, how the fire burns, and the examination of the destruction of the building or house or car. And some of you will end up to be arson or fire investigators, and it's a very interesting job. Varieties and characters of larceny. Totally different from arson. Larceny is basically petty theft in California, and it's basically anything under $900. So it's a misdemeanor petty theft. If it's over $900, then it's going to be a felony. So larceny is kind of a Midwest term. But basically, it's the unlawful taking of property away from someone else's possession without permission. It's the most common form of property crime, larceny. Few larcenies are solved because investigators have few leads to pursue it. Usually there's no witnesses, no useful evidence, little variation in motive, and the property is not remarkable. It's not, say, a gun, or it's not a huge 90-inch television. Usually it's a very small item that's usually worth less than $900, which is a lot of money to some people. But the law looks at it as a very minor and misdemeanor type of case. When you interrogate, or the book talks about considerations with arsonists, burglars, and other thieves, mostly depends on the characteristic of the offender. An emotional offender will be most responsive, and a non-emotional offender will be most responsive to factual themes. So you have to look at the type of offender you have, whether it's male, female, old, young, have they done this before, first time they've been caught. So you look at the emotional themes or the non-emotional themes. Okay, that's a good overview of this chapter. If you have any questions, go ahead and place it in the discussion tab, or you can email me. So onward and upward. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.